Hey guys, it's Kaz here, and today I'm bringing you all the stats in the world, but only from last year. So I'm going to step over here because this area is going to be real full real quick. But first, a few stats that don't need any sort of pictures to go with them. So in 2022 I read 147 books. There's a bit of a caveat there, I'll talk about that a bit later in the video. But like realistically I didn't, but I did. But you'll find out later. So the page count of that was 36,240, and the average book length would be 247 there, which I'm actually quite surprised by because I read some short things, so I'm surprised it's that high, to be quite honest, as the average, but in a good way, surprised in a good way. So I read 105 books physically and 42 books e-bookly. That was definitely due to having Kindle Unlimited for 3 months, which is also the reason that I caveated the first bit. We'll talk about it in a bit. But yes, over 100 physical books read, which is always good. I had a little flick through on my spreadsheet, and I think I read about 60-ish new to me authors as well, which is cool. It's always nice to find new authors and get into them and then read all of their stuff. Talking about authors, let's just switch over to publishers, and I read 87 traditionally published and 60 indie or small publications, which I think is really good. I didn't realise it was that high, but yeah, 60 is good. Some of them were self-published, some of them were published on independent publishers, so all in all I think that was a pretty decent number. And then I hauled 78 books in the year and I read 51% of them, which one of my goals in 2022 and 2023 and the year before and the year to come is to read at least 50% of the books that I haul. So I am actually reading the books I'm getting and I'm not just getting excited about them and going dusty on the shelves. So I did read 51%. Also, two other things that were goals were my 2022 TBR and Buzzwordathon. I'm going to do a separate video about them and like go through and talk about star ratings and all that jazz and what I read for which prompt for Buzzwordathon. So that's going to come up. That'll be the next video probably. So thought I'd do that separate to go into a little bit more detail there. At the start of the year, my physically owned TBR was 215 books, and then at the end of the year it was 164, so I smushed it down by 51 books, even though I hauled 78, so it all works out well. I'm hauling a bunch of books, but my physical TBR is actually going down. Boom. The shortest book I read was AI Resurrection, which was 17 pages. This was actually a really interesting one. It was a random one I found on Kindle Unlimited. 17 pages. It was very interesting. I talked about it at some point in some sort of wrap-up. And the longest book I read, there's a little bit of discrepancy here as well, so I'll tell you why. So, the longest book I read was The Weight of Our Sky, which was 738 pages-ish, kinda, a little bit, maybe, probably not. So, this was a webcomic, and every individual page was like 1 or 2 panels, so you had to click through every individual couple of panels to read it. And I counted it up, I think it came up to like over 1,000, but then I took a few hundred off because I knew realistically if I read it physically they wouldn't only put like 2 panels on one page, so I tried to even it out. So I don't actually know how long that was really. So I've also got the second longest book, which is like definitely a book that I read that was definitely that many pages. And that one was Seal of the Worm at 619. So maybe this was the most pages I read, and maybe that other one was. It depends. Do you count it? The oldest book I read was Shackleton's Boat Journey, which was published in 1940, and it was very good. And the newest book, well, I read 26 books released in 2022, so quite a few. Surprising amount, to be honest, for me. Definitely, if you've come to me a couple of years ago, I'd have read like maybe 1 or 2 releases that released that year, but a mixture of arcs and actually getting stuff that came out that year, actually like paying money instead of just waiting for stuff to come out in charity shops, you know, it added up. And also, I think some of the Kindle Unlimited things I read were recent as well, so yeah, 26. Surprising for me. In terms of series, I completed 10 and I also carried 10 on. probably carried on a few more because I didn't have every single like graphic novel comic written down in my series tracker, so I had the main ones that I knew I was definitely continuing, but other ones I probably started here or there or read the second volume too, so I haven't really counted that. But completing 10 series I think is good, and continuing another 10 I also think is good. A lot of the ones that I carried on with, I only have one book or maybe 2 at a push to finish, so I'm in a pretty good spot with series. Watch me just start loads of them this year just for no reason. So we are finally on the proper graphics here now. I've shown you a few books, but we're going with the actual graphics now, which is what you're all here for. We love a stat. We love a good stat, a good pie chart, a good bar chart. Here you go. So we'll start with read versus hold, and this chart shows you there. The light purple are the books that I read and the dark ones are the ones that I hold. I think it's there. Yes. So sort of my average month of reading would be 7 to 11-ish books. 1 or 2 months I read 6 books. A few I read like 12 or 13. And then in August, September, October, I read 18, 23 and 26 books, which is when I had 3 months free of Kindle Unlimited. So here was my caveat of the amount of books I read. Some of the things I read on Kindle were issues of comics rather than volumes. So it would be like 25, 35 pages, but 5 of them, which would make an issue, which would make a volume normally of a comic. So each one of those are listed individually because I read them individually, and some of them I read at different times and stuff. So that is also why I'm surprised that my average book length is like 240 something, because some of these books, some of these issues were quite small. So yeah, there's my caveat of how many books I've actually read, because several of them were definitely small. And also loads of the things I read in these 3 months were like comics and graphic novels, which is quite funny because I got a Kindle, like a, what are they called? Just a normal Kindle reader, you know, the black and white ones. Got 3 months free Kindle Unlimited with them, and then proceeded to pretty much only read comics, which I had to read on my phone or my Kindle Fire because it was in colour, and there's no colour on a normal Kindle, so I thought that was quite funny. But yeah, those 3 months are definitely outliers. I don't read 23 books, some people do, but that's not me. My average is like 7 to 11. And then if we just talk about the hold books a little bit, so towards the beginning of the year I was quite small, and I think it was July I actually hold no books. Very surprising, I know. But January, February, March, April, pretty low, like 2 or 3. I think there was a few more in January, probably because I had some Christmas money or something. And then it got to May and I hold 9, I think. And that is because in May I went to Oslo and I bought a bunch of polar books from the Fram Museum, which you would have known if you watched that vlog or watched my haul that month. So I think like 4 or maybe 5 of them. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, I just had a little count, and I think 5 of the 9 of books were all from the Fram Museum about polar stuff. And then the month after, I also had quite a high one. I think there was 10 the next month. And again, I was in a polar kick, and like that was the month that I bought my first editions of Farthest North and some other polar stuff. So yeah, I had a little bit of a polar craze there, and then went normal again. And then obviously the 2 months that I hold the most were October and December, because October is my birthday, December is Christmas, so it all makes sense. So next up we're on to authors, and again everything from here on out has been skewed to fuck because of those random little issues. So if I read 5 30-page issues of one comic and all of the authors were male, like the author and the colorist and the artist were male, that's 5 onto the male section, and vice versa to other things. So from here on out everything's skewed to fuck, but it's fine, we move. So with authors I read 64 male, 46 female, 13 non-binary and 24 multiple. So that again is like comics, manga, where there's at least a combination of male, female, or female non-binary, or you know, there's a combination there. Obviously comics that were just male or just female, like Lumberjanes obviously, were just put in that section. So yeah, it's skewed a little bit to male. I think it's because of the comics, and that's fine because I read them and I enjoyed them, so it's cool. Again, with this section was definitely skewed because of that, and that is the race. So I had 102 books that were written by white authors, 25 by BIPOC, 18 with multiple, again that's white and BIPOC within the same book, and 2 that were unknown, which are probably random indie books that I read and I couldn't find anything out about the author because they're probably just some pen name or something. I'm like, who are they? Don't know, not sure. But yeah, this one's definitely skewed again because like all of Lumberjanes, I think I read 6 volumes of Lumberjanes, those were all white. I read like, how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I read 8 volumes of The Walking Dead. That was all in white. So it was definitely skewed by the comics, but still, could have been better with the BIPOC. But I wasn't, and that's fine. Next up, we're going to go to the age range, and with this one, I read 13 middle grade, 73 YA, 6 NA, and 55 adult, which I thought was a nice little mix. I knew I was definitely not really reaching for a lot of middle grade this year, and as you can see, that's the thing. Also with NA, I definitely added some things into NA that some people would put in YA because everyone puts everything in YA for some reason. The characters can be in their 20s, the world building can be really complex, and still people think like, oh, it's Lee Bardugo, so that's a YA, or whatever. You know what I mean? So some of them probably other people would put in YA. For example, I put all of the Dreamer trilogy in NA because it is NA, because they're all in university or older and it's complex, so it's NA, and I don't care what you say, it doesn't have to just be smutty to be NA. There, I said it. So moving on from that, we're going to genre, and again it's a bit skewed, but I do have like two charts for genre. So I read 23 fantasy books, 35 contemporary books, 61 graphic novels, 12 horror slash thriller slash mystery, 11 non-fiction, and 5 sci-fi. Oh, also I put the 1 poetry I read in contemporary because it was like a contemporary poetry thing, and I had like a historical book and a classic book which was The Outsiders, which is also contemporary, so I put it in there as well. So yeah, that is obviously very skewed to graphic novel, but don't worry, I do have a breakdown of the graphic novel genres as well. But I do think it's quite interesting. It's quite similar of different things. Definitely horror, thriller, mystery is something that I've started reading more of. To be fair, I do watch people like Books and Lala and really enjoy the vlogs of all these different random books, but I just never read them. She reads a lot of horror, thrillery, mystery stuff, but I'm starting to read them a little bit more, and it's quite fun. It is quite fun. So obviously let's just break down the graphic novel ones as well. So within the graphic novels, 23 of them were fantasy, 10 were contemporary, 23 were horror slash thriller, 1 was non-fiction, and 4 were sci-fi. So if we add all of that together, contemporary and fantasy are pretty much even Stevens, with 46 fantasy and 45 contemporary. Which makes sense because I can never figure out whether I read more contemporary and fantasy, and that's because I don't. I just read the same amount of both. But obviously, thriller, mystery, horror has definitely jumped up there as well, with 35 all in total, which is a big chunk of reading. And a lot of that is definitely stuff like Nailbiter, the comic, I really enjoyed that, and Hotel was another horror thing. I read quite a few horror comics in October, Halloween-y. And Something is Killing the Children, that's also going to be in there. So there's a lot of these sort of things. I do definitely lean more towards horror, thrillery stuff in comic form, but this year I've obviously also been reaching towards it in book form, which is a nice little thing to just note and realise, I guess. And then the last section with a nice little graphic here is the star ratings. So I do 0.5 star ratings. I don't do whatever the thing is called, core pile. I don't get it. I know if it's for you, it's for you, and I love that for you, and I'm glad and grateful, but I can't comprehend how you can like put these numbers to like, oh, this bit of the plot is worth 0.7 and this bit of the characters is worth 0.4, and that means that this book is 4. How? To me, ratings are a feeling. I don't understand how. Like, what if the character's amazing and the plot's pretty bad? That doesn't mean that the book's not amazing for me personally. What if the characters were really good and it doesn't matter about the plot? So yeah, I can't understand that core pile stuff, but I love it if you can. It's just not for me. Ratings are a feeling, and those feelings were as follows. I didn't rate anything 1 or 1.5, which is great. I've only ever given out one star, and that was last year, I think. So yeah, that's a good sign. So I had 3 books that were 2 stars, 1 book that was 2.5, 11 that was 3, 42 which were 3.5, very average, makes sense, like, it's alright. 61 that were 4 stars, 18 that were 4.5, and 11 that were 5. And you're probably thinking, 11, that's 5, that's low. And I'm thinking, 11? I didn't realise I had 11 5 stars. When I say rating is a feeling, 5 stars is even more so a feeling. I could have a book and not tell you why it's not 5 stars, but it's not 5 stars because my body and my brain and my mind and my emotion says it's not. And that's how ratings work for me. So I think 11's pretty decent. It's probably about average of what I normally give out every year. Sometimes I think, oh, I'll try and rate higher, like, but then I do it and I'm like, this doesn't feel genuine because it's not 5 stars to me. So I'm not gonna like give everything 5 stars, but I am gonna give most things 4 stars it seems, and 4.5, which is good. It means that I enjoyed most of the things I read. Having only 15 books out of 147 be 3 stars or lower is definitely a positive, I think. So yeah, that's a good time. I will be going through my highest and lowest ratings. It will be like a best and worst books. So you'll find out what they are in there, but obviously I'm not going to go into detail in this one because we've been here long enough and you're bored. But at least I gave you stats and stuff to look at. So there we go. Those are all the things that I've got written down, that I've been tracking, that I've seen what's going on. I know some people have loads of other cool trackings and I really enjoy watching it. But whenever I'm doing mine, I don't think of doing all that stuff. So hopefully you enjoyed what I do have. Let me know down below what your stats were. Maybe pick out one of these stats, or maybe the outlier. If you've got an outlier stat that was different, that you weren't expecting, that were pleasant or not pleasant, let me know that one. Maybe you read more of a certain genre that you thought, or maybe you gave out a certain amount of star ratings that you weren't expecting. Or maybe, you know, you bought too many books and you read one of them. Let me know down below. I also didn't put a cat clip in here because I was just too focused on the stats. So we're going to do that right here, right now. Oh, we all took it out by the stats. Too many stats. Too many stats. No such thing as too many stats. Okay. You're lovely. Let me in here. Yeah. Beep. And I hope you enjoyed the video. Subscribe if you want to, and I'll see you in a few days with my 2022/Buzzwordathon deep dive. See you later.